After understanding the general thing about what is happening with the limits, then we can begin to look at the limits from the graphical or from the graphic side. So we will call this topic graphical limits. Why is this topic called graphical limits? Because the only thing that we have to do is to identify that if some limit exists for the function when x approaches some value. And in order to identify that, we have to look for the values of the lateral limits. For example, this is a piecewise function. Remember that the function is all these is composed by all these black lines here. So all of these things are part of the function. The first thing that we have to identify is what is the number that we want to study for the limit, for a specific limit, or in order to obtain a specific limit. So for example here, I think that the easiest ones here will be the -2 and the -1. Later we will study what is happening with 0 and 2. So if we are working with the -2, then in order to identify that it's for some limit, the existence of some limit, you want to identify the limit when x approaches 2. Then of f of x. F of x is the function. You don't need here the definition of the function. The limit when x approaches 2 of f of x. In order to identify this thing here, you need to define what is happening from the left side of the -2. Sorry, this is a -2. From the left side, and what is happening from the right side of the number. So you need to see what is happening from the left side and what is happening from the right side in order to identify if this limit exists or does not exist. So we have here the -2. This is the -2. So the number will be always at the middle, okay? So you have two options. This is the function. Remember that you will be approaching this -2, this number, using the function as a path, as a specific path here. So this is the right side of the function. This is the right side of the function. And this part will be the negative side of the function. So what is happening when you approaches? Remember that you are getting closer and closer and closer to the number -2. If you approaches the number -2 from the left side, this is the left side, then all the values of y will go down and down and down and down. Why? Because here you have an asymptote. This thing here is an asymptote. So you will get closer and closer and closer to a very, very small number, okay? And a small number that we call -infinity. So from the right side, when x approaches -2 from the left side, then y is approaching -infinity. What is happening from the right side? From the right side, if you study from the right side, the function from the right side, then we will see that the same thing is happening. All the values of y will go down and down and down and down and down and are becoming smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So from the right side, the same thing is happening. We are approaching a negative number, a very, very small number that we don't know, so we will call that number -infinity. -infinity, it's the same thing as this -infinity. So the general limit, the limit when x approaches -2, will be -infinity. The final thing to study here is what is happening with the value of the function. Do you have any value of the function? Do you have any particular point that you can identify here on the vertical line -2? The answer is no. Nothing is happening with y when x is approaching -2. You don't have a real value here. You can approach the number, but you don't have any real value on the number, like this one. We will study this one now. But the value when the value for y when x is negative 2, then the value does not exist. We don't have any value here. We don't have any point over the line, okay? So to finish this explanation, we will see what is happening in negative 1 and positive 2. In order to see what is happening with negative 1, you have to study if you want to define the limit when x approaches negative 1 of f of x. Then you have to study what is happening when x approaches negative 1 from the left side of the function, and you want to define what is happening when x approaches, I'm sorry, this one goes there, limit when x approaches negative 1 from the right side of the function f of x. And at last, you want to understand what is happening with the value of the function at negative 1. Do we have any value at negative 1? That is the question here. So in order to define these things, you have to study what is happening with the function from the left side. Now, the left side, remember that now negative 1 is at the middle. This is the middle, okay? The number is at the middle. Then, if you approach that number from the left side, if we study this number, this is the left side, and this is the right side. From the left side, if we approach a negative 1, then the value of y will be 0, okay? This thing is getting closer and closer to the x-axis, and the definition of the x-axis for y is 0. So the value here will be 0. From the right side, we don't have anything here. We don't have any function between negative 1 and 0. So if we cannot approach that point, we will say that from the right side, because we don't have any type of function here, the function does not exist. Okay? 0 is not the same thing as something that does not exist, so the general limit does not exist at all. Remember, in order to have the general limit, the values from the left side and from the right side must be the same ones. And the value of the function, we have to look for a specific value here, and we have that here, this closed point here. The value of the function, the value of y, when x is equal to negative 1, it's there, it's at 0. So the value of the function has nothing to do with the value of the limit. And I think that's all. I don't have more time to explain what is happening with the negative 2, but if you want to analyze this negative 2, then this is the left side, this is the positive side, and you will approach that number, and now you can define what is happening. You will have a limit, but not a value for the function.